In the last section, we tossed all of our code out the window and started from scratch. We also began the process of making a component. Remember, a component represents something that we want to show on the screen of our device. We create a component by calling the createClass method and passing it an object. The object only has one requirement, and it has to have a key of render that points to a function. So let's go ahead and continue work on this render function now. The purpose of the render method here is to always return some code that describes what we want our component to look like. That means that our component must absolutely always return some value here, or return something. So let's go ahead and put in a return statement right now. Now the question is, what do we want to return, right? We want to return something, but we don't really know what just yet. So this is where the idea of JSX comes into play. JSX is one of the many supporting technologies around React. It's a dialect of JavaScript that can be compiled directly into JavaScript code. So as a matter of fact, that's kind of confusing, right? Let's go ahead and investigate that a little bit more right now. I'm going to go ahead and open up my browser, and I'm going to go ahead and Google JSX compiler, and then just go ahead and click on the first result here, which should be a Facebook link. In the window that pops up, we get what is called a a live JSX editor. So on the left-hand side, we have some JSX code, and on the right-hand side, it gets compiled into just raw JavaScript. So you can see that what's already in here looks very similar to what we've already written in our browser, in our code editor. We have react.createClass. We pass it an object. It has a render key, and that's a function, and it returns something. And so if you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, well, what about this right here? This is the actual JSX right here. So JSX is essentially, it's some chunk of code that kind of looks like HTML, right? You can see that there's the div tag, and inside of it we have what just looks like basically raw text. You can kind of forget this right now. So let's just take it out. So basically inside of it we just have some raw text. On the right hand side is the result. It's what the JSX on the left hand side compiles into when it's turned into raw JavaScript. And you can see that that div right there, that div tag on the left hand side, turns into what looks like basically a function call. Okay, let's go ahead and add a little bit more JSX in here right now. So I'm going to expand our div tag. We're going to add an HR. We'll put in another div. And inside of this second div, we'll say H1. Here's a great picture. Close it. Add an image tag. And boom, we're good to go. So if we were writing code for the browser, and of course, ultimately this course is not about the browser, but the concepts are still the same, you can kind of see what might be going on here. We have a wrapping div. It has some text of hello. We have a horizontal rule, and we've got another div that contains a heading and an image. So note how on the left-hand side it looks so similar to HTML, but on the right-hand side it really just turns into a bunch of function calls, right? So there's really three important notes to draw from this example here. First off, JSX describes the structure of what we want our component to look like. If we were writing React for the browser, this JSX right here that gets returned from our render method, it would create a div, some text, HR, a div, H1, an image tag. And that would be put out or pushed out to our browser. Writing JSX for mobile apps works basically the same way. It places content on our screen like images, text, and buttons. We write JSX instead of writing raw function calls, as you see on the right, because it's much easier to read. It's much easier to understand, right? We can scan over this code over here on the left and say, okay, I have a general idea of what's going on. I've got a general idea of the structure of what I'm trying to convey here for my render method. Now look at the right-hand side. This is, it's nearly a soup. There's just a lot of context here. There's a lot of characters on the screen. The last note is that JSX retains many of the features that we are used to when we write HTML. For example, I can write just text hello, and I can also, for example, give my image tag a source property of image.jpg. So there's a lot of elements from HTML that kind of borrowed in, a lot of syntax that gets borrowed in from raw HTML. JSX can also weave in raw JavaScript variables, as we saw before I deleted it. There was this.props.name, but we'll talk more about exactly what this is doing in a later section. So in this section, overall, we discuss the purpose of JSX and its benefits over writing raw JavaScript. If still a little bit hazy on what JSX is doing for us, don't sweat it. On almost every section of this course, we end up writing some JSX, so we're certainly going to get used to it over time. I'll catch you in the next section.